When science says the world evolved from a Big Bang, human beings evolve from apes, that opinion sits someplace between what is and what isn't.
Rabbi Friedman, you're not just spouting nonsense. You're also conflating multiple theories that are not the same thing. The Big Bang was almost 10 billion years before the accretion of our world. That Big Bang theory, which is mostly credited to Georges Lemaitre in 1927, and planetary accretion theory, proposed by Otto Schmidt in 1944, have virtually nothing to do with each other. So it doesn't make much sense to say that our world, our planet, evolved from a Big Bang. And neither of these scientific explanations has any relation at all to the theory of evolution presented by Charles Darwin in 1859. The title of your video, Rabbi Friedman, is Rabbi Disproves Darwin. Darwin never heard of the Big Bang because that name wasn't circulated until like 100 years later. And it's a theory in astrophysics, not biology. You have yet to address, cite, or understand anything that Darwin ever said. Unless otherwise specified, when scientists speak of evolution, they're referring to the one and only scientific explanation of biodiversity via population mechanics, summarily defined as descent with inherent modification. Paraphrased for clarity, it is a process of varying allele frequencies among reproductive populations, leading to usually subtle changes in the morphological or physiological composition of descendant subsets. When compiled over successive generations, these can expand biodiversity, when continuing variation between genetically isolated groups eventually lead to one or more descendant branches increasingly distinct from their ancestors or cousins. Evolutionary theory, therefore, has nothing whatsoever to do with the origins of the universe nor the formation of planets, because those things are not reproductive organisms. They don't have DNA. Otherwise, congratulations, you finally mentioned evolution. 25 minutes after you said, let's talk about monkeys. And then you never said another word about monkeys after that, until now. And since everything you say is wrong, let me correct you on this too. Science has discovered that we evolved from apes. That's not an opinion. That's a confirmed fact. It's also the only explanation for why we are still apes even now, both morphologically and genetically. Google the taxonomic superfamily Hominoidea to see what I mean.
Because if we go back 15 billion years, we're talking about what isn't.
I understand it, under current models, if we go back 15 billion years, we would come to a singularity, a unification of everything that is, not what isn't. Or we might come to a rapidly accelerating collapse of a prior version of the universe. But whatever it is, it's not nothing. There was never a time when there was just nothing.
Because what happened 15 billion years ago to the physical universe is as unavailable as that which does not exist.
A century or so ago, astronomers started noticing things like other galaxies outside of this one, galaxies that are evidently moving away from us and moving away from each other. Not like they repel each other, but in at least some cases, it seems that these galaxies are being carried along by the continued inflation of the space between them, which I think is what led physicists to consider the existence of antimatter, which has been described as a form of dark matter that is also a form of anti-gravity. Of course, some of the data could be misleading, or some of what we consider safe assumptions could be wrong, but if the universe is expanding in the way that galactic redshift and cosmic microwave background radiation and other observations and calculations imply, then as we travel backward in time, then the universe seems to come back together. Under classical physics and general relativity, it all seems to come together very tightly. Not just matter and energy, but space and time. Everything there is right here. And there's nothing outside of that. I mean, there's not even nothing outside of that, meaning that even empty space, Everything there is, including empty space, is right here. That's if this particular model and my admittedly limited understanding of it are both correct. I don't know cosmogony. I study evolution, which is a completely different subject.
So now we're talking about an opinion, a theory, that's why it's called the theory of evolution.
No, Dumbledore. A scientific theory is not an opinion. It's a body of knowledge enveloping all facts, hypotheses, and natural laws pertaining to that field of study. This is where I have to have pity for Rabbi Friedman, and especially anyone who turns to him seeking wisdom on virtually any topic. He obviously has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, but that doesn't matter in religion as long as you sound confident and folksy at the same time.
We're talking about a theory that doesn't really lend itself to scientific scrutiny.
Cosmogony and evolution both really do lend themselves to scientific scrutiny. Evolution much more directly because we've been experimenting, albeit unwittingly, with evolution for millennia. It's just that we didn't really know how it works until the last 100 years or so. Now we know an awful lot more about evolution than we did, in Darwin's time, or even 100 years after Darwin's time. Well, I shouldn't say that we know more. Your understanding is still centuries out of date, much like your sense of fashion.
Because nobody was there. Because you can't reproduce it. Because you can't check it out. So you're talking about a scientific or educated guess. And it may be a very good one. Human beings are creative, ingenious.
Present company excluded, because we actually can reproduce it. We can check it out. Again, this is easier to do with evolution, which has become the foundation of modern biology. You made an hour-long presentation pretending to overthrow that, which, if you had actually done that, then that would have given you a Nobel Prize and the Templeton Prize. You can't overthrow evolution because you don't even know what it is. All you can do is recite the same irrelevant idiocy as every other illiterate literalist.
Were you there?
Oh, and importantly, none of the authors of the Torah were there either. We know because scientific evidence proves that your favorite fables are just fantasy fiction.
And we can come up with incredible, impressive theory.
It's harder to come up with a theory than you think, because a theory is not a guess. Although you could start with a guess, as long as it actually accounts for all the available data at once, and there's some way to test it and potentially falsify it if it happens to be wrong, because we got to know. If it is testable and potentially falsifiable, and it actually explains some things, then it qualifies as a hypothesis. And it's not just you testing it. You have to submit it to peer review, where experts in the field can test it too, not just once or twice or by one particular way, but indefinitely, forever, by any means imaginable, by anybody who wants to try. Then, if no one can find anything wrong with it, you might find something right with it, meaning that if your hypothesis is correct, then we could predict X and Y as an extension of that, and you begin testing for those too. Now, let's say that your hypothesis has been tested by every specialist around the world for years, decades, maybe a century or more, and it's never failed any test, ever. And it explains everything that it was originally meant to explain, and everything that has come up since then, even the new data that keeps coming in from other related fields. It all matches up, including the stuff that was predicted years ago and was only just confirmed recently. With that kind of track record, if you come to a point where it's obviously not just a hypothesis anymore, but since science has a rule against proving anything in the positive sense, because that would stop the progress of knowledge, but this guess turned out to be the most tried and true realization in all of science, then there should be some way to recognize that. Thus, what was a mere hypothesis can be elevated to the level of theory, the highest degree of confidence science can achieve. As you can see, it doesn't matter how creative you are. You have to be right, too, or you'll never get there.
Is this in conflict with what the Torah says? Is it in conflict with what religion teaches us? The answer is it can't be in conflict. The Torah tells us what happened, not what might have happened.
No, the Torah is a compilation of mostly myths and legends. The Torah tells us stories, tall tales of fantasy folklore that we now know, and the original authors already knew, did not really happen.
Religion is telling you from the horse's mouth, pardon the expression, how and when this happened.
And not only are the events and the details all wrong because it didn't happen at all, but the timing is wrong too. The date normally given by young Earth creationists for the global flood is in the 24th century BCE, during the reign of Sargon-of-Akkad, a time that would have interrupted a continuous procession of Egyptian pharaohs. And there are a number of other historical contradictions behind that too. 6,000 years ago, when the Wanna Pretenders imagined that the universe was being created, there were already civilizations established in Africa and the Middle East, Asia, and the Americas, and DNA from human remains found in Australia and Argentina, dating back to well before the creation of the world, matched the genetic signatures of the people that are still living in those areas now. We have genetically mapped human migration all around the globe before the world was supposedly created, which doesn't just disprove the date of creation, it also disproves any date you can find for the global flood that we know never happened for a bunch of other reasons too. All of this and a whole lot more too proves that the Torah does not come from the horse's mouth, but from the quill of a few random nobodies in the Middle Eastern Bronze Age who obviously had no idea what they were talking about, ever.
Science is trying to figure out how it could have happened, what might have happened.
Science shows us that, yeah, that can't happen. We can prove that it didn't happen, but just follow the clues and look at what can and evidently did happen.
Is there a conflict?
Yes, there is.
There's no conflict.
Yes, there is. Several of them.
There's no conflict.
Keep telling yourself that, Balin, son of Fundin.
Balin, at your service.
I can have many good theories about where this lectern came from and how it got here. Good theories, every one of them. But none of them are true. Some guy lugged it in, which is kind of boring. I had much more interesting theories about it.
Maybe you pulled it out of your ass, in which case I'd be happy to put it back for you. You don't have a theory. You don't even know what a theory is. A theory is a field of study. The high school I went to taught a class called music theory, and I wasn't in that class, but I burst in one day and interrupted the lesson by yelling, "You can't teach music in school. It's just a theory. It's never been proven." Now, if you think that sounds stupid coming from a teenage boy, imagine how much dumber it sounds coming from a 77-year-old garden gnome.
So is there a conflict between my theory and the fact? No. I'm trying to give you a theory, and you're interrupting me with the facts.
Scientific theories are different from mathematics theories, like string theory, for example, in that modern scientific theories are not just theoretical. They can also be facts. Remember the previous video when we mentioned atomic theory? It's not like atoms are just a theory. And then there's the germ theory of disease and cell theory of biology. And we've got two different theories of gravity, and we're still looking for another one. Understand that what Darwin said in his book about the origin of species, that new species evolve via mechanisms like natural selection, that is a now many times demonstrated, verified, inescapable fact that has been directly observed and documented numerous times by different means.
So the Torah doesn't say this could have happened, this might have happened. Torah tells you God said, and it was.
What the Torah said was wrong about all of it. Yeah, at least most of it anyway. Pretty much everything. I mean, there's some of the names of people and places are real, but not a lot else.
Is that in any way a contradiction to the theory of evolution? No, it's not.
Well, Genesis got pretty much everything laughably wrong, so that's a rather significant problem.
It only becomes a conflict when those who teach the theory of evolution present it as a fact. The Big Bang happened 13 billion years ago in February. Now we got a conflict because they can't both be true.
Right. The Bible is not true, but then we already knew that. Geologists had already figured that out decades before Darwin. Now, I don't know about Big Bang cosmology. I don't have much firsthand information about that. It's not what I study. But I do know evolution, which is an entirely different and unrelated theory, and that definitely happened, and it's still happening. We can measure it, and test it, and confirm it myriad ways, and even use it in a number of applications. Our agricultural industry depends on it. So it's kind of ridiculous at this point in the 21st century to pretend as if it's not even real. We know better, and we can prove it by an overwhelming preponderance of evidence beyond reasonable doubt, no matter how much you try to pretend otherwise.
But if evolution is a theory, the best theory that human minds can come up with, and the Bible is God's word on what he did and when he did it, there's no conflict. There's no contest.
Well, you're half right, which is the best you've managed to be so far. Evolution is the best theory according to all the available evidence and data, while the Bible is the word of ignorant, bigoted, superstitious savages who thought that the world was flat and didn't know where the sun went at night. So they said that everything happened by magic, and we know better than that now.
If somebody says 4, and you're asked, well, how did they get to the 4? How did they arrive at 4? You can say, oh, they must have added 2 and 2. That's a good theory. It's a very good theory, because 2 and 2 is 4. That's amazing. But then you ask the guy, how did you get to 4? He says, I subtracted 4 from 8. You say, oh, come on, you didn't do that. You know, that's what I did. But why would you do that when you could have gotten to 4 by adding 2 and 2? I don't know, but that's what I did. So if you say, but 2 and 2 equals 4, yes, you're right. Did this guy get to the 4 by doing that? No, he didn't. He went the other way.
Are you hoping that if you ramble on with enough irrelevant nonsense and gaslighting straw men long enough that maybe your audience will get confused and forget what you were supposed to be talking about? Next time you have to give a speech on a topic, learn what the topic is before the presentation. At least Google, what is evolution? It's too late now because it's already due and you've wasted enough time, so get back on topic, please.
Did the world come into existence through evolution? Who could say for sure? Not a scientist. If a scientist says for sure, this is the only way it could happen, he's not a scientist anymore. He's being dogmatic.
When you're right, and you can effectively prove it the way I said, while also conclusively proving that there is no alternative, literally no competing theory at all, nothing but a fractured fairy tale we know is already not true, then that's not being dogmatic, that's being factually accurate and honest. which I realize is a problem for those who believe on faith.
And the science of evolution is not nearly as solid as 2 and 2 equals 4.
Evolution is up there with atomic theory as being among the best supported theories in all of science, hands down, even better supported than the theory of gravity.
So we should never get caught up in this tension between science and religion. There is no tension.
There was so much tension right from the beginning of our awakening.
To the very root and foundation of his nature, man is one with the rest of the organic world. This! Believe in this! Believe in God, not man!
If you want to know what happened, only God can tell you.
The colloquial phrase, God only knows, means that nobody knows. Your God doesn't know. The reason that you have a personal relationship with God is because he is your magic imaginary friend. He doesn't know any more than you do because he is you.
You want to know what might have happened? Hey, let's make theories all you want. Good theories, poor theories, we'll argue, we'll debate. It's good for the brain, keeps you young.
Is that why you're so old? Because you clearly don't know what might have happened, what can happen, nor what did happen. You still believe in what can't happen and didn't happen.
I think, I'm not sure that this is exactly true, but I think that the debate on the theory of evolution has changed over time.
You mean it has evolved? Yes, we learn more and more about evolution all the time, enough to know what we know about it. It's true, it's demonstrable, it works, it's a thing, there's no way around that. And we learn more and more about the Bible too, enough to know that it's at least mostly false and that it isn't at all reliable.
Because it was first called Theory on the Origins of the Universe.
No, it wasn't. Evolution was never described that way. Where do you get your information? Do you just make it up as you go along? When you're at the synagogue, when you discuss the holy books with the learned men 7 hours every day, is this what they tell you evolution is? Because as I understand it, most rabbis accept evolution. Creationists like you are an embarrassment to them, an embarrassment to Judaism.
Evolution was to explain the origins of the universe.
Darwin never commented on the origin of the universe. I doubt whether he even thought it had an origin.
That didn't happen. We are no closer to the origins than we were before. In fact, we're further away. We never thought it would be 15 billion years.
You know, you overshot it by more than 1 billion years. That's quite a margin of error.
We just keep pushing it further and further away. But we haven't gotten closer to origin.
That's because it seems now that there was no origin. The Big Bang was not the beginning. It seems that the universe just goes on for an eternity in both directions.
Because we don't know how nothing turned into something. And that's what we need to know if we're going to understand the origins.
No, nothing ever turned into something because there was never just nothing.
Now, the theory of evolution is here to tell you the age of the universe, not its origins.
No, the theory of evolution never had anything to say about the age of the universe. The theory of evolution was on the origin of species, not the origin of life, the universe, and everything. So that's a pretty good book, too. Either one of these is better than the one you're reading from.